Tune in and introduce yourself.
Now, later than billed, the Saturday night news on BBC One with Clive Myrie.
5 NHS trusts still have problems after yesterday's international cyber attack, but the majority are back up and running. As ministers attend an emergency meeting in Downing Street, the Home Secretary insists the government was ready to deal with the crisis.
There's always more we can all do to make sure that we're secure against viruses, but I think that there had already been good preparations in place by the NHS to make sure that they were ready for this sort of attack.
We're doing our best. It's going great.
Jeremy Corbyn denies senior figures in the Labour Party are already accepting defeat in the general election. And victory for Saracens as they win the European Champions Cup for the second year running. Good evening. 5 NHS trusts are still experiencing serious problems after yesterday's international cyber attack. 43 of the trusts affected in England and Scotland are now returning to normal. The attack on Friday caused ambulances to be diverted and numerous cancellations and delays in treatment, though A&D departments were not affected. The government's emergency committee, COBRA, has been meeting, chaired by the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
It was news which shocked NHS staff and patients alike, a cyber attack which shut down some key systems. Ron Grimshaw won't forget it in a hurry. He was in the middle of having an MRI scan in hospital, but it was abruptly halted, and he'll have to go back another day.
I was stunned, obviously stunned, and as the nurse said, this is the very first time this has happened. So I thought, well, why me? But there we are, yeah.
The Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt was at a meeting of the government's emergency committee COBRA along with the Home Secretary, who denied there were weaknesses in NHS systems.
I don't believe it's to do with their preparedness. There's always more we can all do to make sure that we're secure against viruses, but I think that there had already been good preparations in place by the NHS to make sure that they were ready for this sort of attack.
In England, services at 48 NHS trusts, about a fifth of the total, have been affected, along with some GP surgeries. In Scotland, 11 out of 14 health boards have felt the impact, including hospitals and GP surgeries. The Scottish Ambulance Service was also affected.
The NHS is now very much in the recovery phase, so there is a great deal of work ongoing to get systems back to normal, and of course every effort is being made to ensure that any impact on patient care is kept to an absolute minimum.
A small number of trusts, including Barts Health, which runs the Royal London Hospital, are said to be still needing help coping with the aftermath of the cyber attack. The emergency department is open, but some ambulances are being diverted to other hospitals. Getting the IT system up and running again is proving to be a major challenge. Others, like York Hospital, say while they've contained the virus, it could take a while to restore non-urgent services.
To get 2,000 PCs back into commission will undoubtedly take a few days, but we will be working all around the clock to do that as fast as we can.
At this hospital in Wigan, IT staff have been working throughout the day to try to get systems fully operational.
I'm a little concerned because we don't quite know what we're going to find on Monday morning when people come in and open up their laptops. But I think we've got sufficient understanding of the nature of the problem that we can be very confident that we can solve whatever does come along on Monday morning.
Most of the English trusts hit by the attack are said to have restored their IT capability. Emergency care is being provided across the NHS, but there could still be more cancellations of routine surgery and appointments next week. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
In all, 99 countries across the world were affected by the cyber attack, which the EU's serious crime agency, Europol, described as unprecedented. Here, investigators have promised to do everything they can to catch those responsible, as our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford explains.
The cyber attack which wreaked such chaos in Britain's health service was actually a global assault. affecting Russia worst of all, but also countries as far apart as the US, Australia and Japan. This evening, the two British agencies tackling it said a complex international investigation would be needed to catch the culprits.
We haven't identified the offenders at this moment in time, but we are deploying all covert and overt means available to us, and we have a number of lines of inquiry. It's really important that we pursue those quickly so that we can reassure the public we are taking this very seriously.
At the heart of this global cyber attack was a software worm, which spreads itself from computer to computer using code originally designed by a US government spy agency. It's called WannaCrypt, and it simply encrypts all the files on the infected computer and then demands a ransom. By last night, at least 75,000 computers had been infected in at least 74 countries. At that point, a cybersecurity expert managed almost by chance to stop it spreading. But all the data on the infected computers is still unusable until a ransom is paid. Any modern computer that had had its software regularly updated was safe, but some NHS trusts use old operating systems that were particularly vulnerable. Others may have simply failed to take a security update in March. Today, the National Cybersecurity Centre had this simple advice.
The first one is to make sure that your security software patches are up to date. The second is to employ proper, good antivirus software. And the third, and the most important for ransomware protection, is back up your data, because you can't be held to ransom if you've got a backup.
It's been a reminder of how vulnerable vital organisations like health services are to attack by organised criminals seeking to raise money or by hostile states and terrorist groups trying to cause maximum disruption.
The reality is there are thousands of vulnerabilities across all the different software applications that companies and organisations use. So, for example, if we were to look at a company of 50,000 computers, we might find hundreds of thousands of open vulnerabilities on those machines.
It's also a reminder that computers are not a one-off investment. They need to be kept up to date. Daniel Sandford, BBC News.
Jeremy Corbyn has denied some at the top of the Labour Party are already accepting defeat in the general election. It follows comments from his deputy, Tom Watson, that the Conservatives could be heading for a landslide victory. Mr Corbyn said both he and Mr Watson were working flat out to get Labour elected on June the 8th. Meanwhile, the former Labour Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has urged voters not to give Theresa May a blank cheque to run the country. Our political correspondent, Ian Watson, reports.
Two big beasts, a former Prime Minister and a former Deputy Prime Minister, entered the fray to claim the Conservatives are waging a war on the poor. Now, you'd assume Gordon Brown might say the next Labour government would stop this. In fact, his message was, don't give Theresa May too much power.
Mrs May's Britain will have more poverty and inequality than even the poverty we saw in the Thatcher major years. No Conservative Prime Minister should ever be given a free hand.
And the party's deputy leader, Tom Watson, insisted he was determined to turn round Labour's position in the polls, but also warned of the dangers of a big Conservative victory. He said if we get to June the 8th and Theresa May still commands the lead in the polls she had at the start of the election, she'll command a Margaret Thatcher-style majority. As Labour MPs battle to get back here to Westminster, we're now seeing, if you like, a tale of two campaigns. The official one, emphasising what Labour would do in government, and an unofficial one, where some candidates are telling me they're going beyond what Gordon Brown and Tom Watson are saying. They're telling voters on the doorstep they're simply campaigning to become a strong opposition. And in some local leaflets like this, there's no mention of Jeremy Corbyn. Instead, the whole emphasis is on reining in Theresa May. Jeremy Corbyn wanted to keep his focus on the election issues.
We're doing our best and it's going great.
He said he was working flat out for victory and rejected suggestions that any of his colleagues were throwing in the towel.
Is it that senior Labour figures now are already admitting defeat?
Not at all. I'm out round the whole country, the party's out round the whole country, putting out a message. We're a party for the many, not the few. We will invest in our NHS, our education system, we'll protect our pensions and pensioners, and we'll ensure there's an expanding economy that works for all.
So Jeremy Corbyn doesn't think he needs to shore up his support, but he and his deputy leader both agree the party faces a huge challenge to turn the political tide before June the 8th. Ian Watson, BBC News.
The Liberal Democrats say their election manifesto will include proposals to build 300,000 new homes a year for sale and rent by 2022. The leader, Tim Farron, also says developers who stockpile land without building on it would be penalised. And Theresa May has been campaigning in Northern Ireland today. She called on politicians there to work together to return to power sharing. Controversy over a botched renewable energy scheme led to the collapse of the Stormont executive in January. Now, North Korea is reported to have launched another missile from an area near its west coast. In recent months, Pyongyang has tried and failed to successfully test other ballistic missiles. This time, though, one is said to have flown some 400 miles. Neighbouring Japan has condemned the launch. More than 800 children and teenagers who'd lost a parent while serving in the armed forces have attended a garden party at Buckingham Palace. They were welcomed by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry. Among them was the widow and son of the Fusilier Lee Rigby, who was murdered in a terror attack in 2013. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
It's a very large garden, accustomed to formal events like garden parties. But it's a perfect place too for a children's party, which is exactly what was happening at Buckingham Palace this afternoon. 800 children had been invited to the palace by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry for a very special reason. Each of these children has lost a parent serving in the armed forces. One of the children at the palace was Jack Rigby, the 6-year-old son of Fusilier Lee Rigby, murdered by extremists in London 4 years ago. He was with his mother, Rebecca.
It's a chance for the parents to meet each other and to just know that you're in a safe environment, and you know you can ask advice of the other parents. They've been through things similar to what you have and similar experiences, and they've at different points had to go through the same things as you are, the questions and you know the explanations of what's happened. It's just, yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity for both the parents and the children.
The Rigbys met Prince Harry, who was demonstrating the plate spinning. The royals joined in, posing for pictures, entertaining the crowd, and all of it with a serious message.
That we as a family, we as a nation, and we up and down the country will never, ever, ever forget about the sacrifices that every single one of you have made.
What this event does is bring together 3 of the issues in which William, Kate and Harry take a particular interest: young people, the armed forces and bereavement. And for a few hours in the grounds of Buckingham Palace, those wider cares could be put to one side. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
Now, with all the day's sport, here's Catherine Downs at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Clive. Good evening. An historic night for Saracens. They're European champions for a second successive year, beating French side Clermont-Auvergne 28-17 in a tight final. Patrick Geary was watching at Murrayfield.
It looks like we're in for nasty weather.
Edinburgh, city of performing arts, and a stage for a team that's made performing its art. Saracens, European champions last year, back to defend their title.
Go on, Saracens! Go on! Wherever Saracens go, their fans expect success. They are 17 games unbeaten in this competition. 1 match from the record, 1 match from greatness.
That status is earned on occasions like this, when the best drown out the surround sound. Alex Goode spotted Chris Ashton on his radar, down the runway, prepare for takeoff. That made him the European Cup's top try scorer. This is signature in the record books. Sarries were rampant, another try was coming. George Cruise's finish was forceful rather than photogenic, 12-0. Deja vu for those in blue. Clermont have lost 13 major finals, but Remy Lamorat gave them hope of a break with convention. Saracens edged further ahead, but Clermont were onto something. Nick Abendanon, once of England, sent roars echoing to the middle of France. 72 minutes, 1 point in it, just when Saracens thrive. Again, Alex Goode saw a chance. The man who created the first try scored the decisive one. Owen Farrell's mastery of geometry improved the arithmetic. Job done, trophy won. Saracens lift to yet another level. Patrick Geary, BBC News at Murrayfield.
Football, and Swansea took a huge step towards Premier League survival, beating relegated Sunderland 2-0. Man in the day's other Premier League fixtures, Manchester City moved up to third, beating Leicester 2-1. Leicester had a penalty controversially disallowed, and Arsenal continued their charge towards the Champions League places with a 4-1 win over Stoke. In the Scottish Premiership, Rangers secured a third-place finish, beating Hearts 2-1. Barry Mackay scored the second-half winner. Elsewhere, Motherwell's win over Hamilton means they swap positions in the table, leaving Hamilton in the relegation playoff place. Manchester City's women have completed a domestic treble. Jill Scott scored the last of their goals as they beat Birmingham City ladies 4-1 in front of a record crowd at Wembley to add the FA Cup to their league and Continental Cup titles. Lewis Hamilton secured pole for the Spanish Grand Prix by the finest of margins. He was less than a tenth of a second faster than Sebastian Vettel after the German made a mistake on the final corner. Hamilton's Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas is in third. And double Olympic boxing champion Nicola Adams has won her second professional fight, competing in her hometown, Leeds, for the first time in 20 years. Adams stopped Mexico's Marianne Salazar in the third round. And that's all the sport. Back to you, Clive.
Catherine, thank you for that. Catherine Downs there. Now, in case you missed it, the winner of this year's Eurovision Song Contest is Portugal. Held in Kiev, the competition included a dancing gorilla from Italy. Britain's entry, a power ballad from Lucy Jones, came 15th out of the 26 acts. And that's it. You can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. But from me and the Late team, have a very good night.
Good evening. If you are hoping for